Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a podcast of friends coming together to talk about Star Wars and other nerd-related media. Today, we have a very special episode with a very different triad for everybody. I said it, we were going to get a triad assembled. I did it, and it's no one that you expected. And today, we have very special guests to talk about nothing else but the High Republic. So please welcome today from Force Toast, Laura Kelly from Star Wars Explained, Alex Damon. How's it going, guys? Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
It's going good.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I mean, none of you are strangers to this channel, so it's always fun to talk to friends again and be back in the triad format. This is gonna be new for me. We haven't had the triad assembled in a long time on the channel, so we'll see if I can wrangle three people, the three of us instead of a dyad. So please bear with me. But yeah, like I said, we're gonna talk about Star Wars: The High Republic today, since Phase 3 has finally culminated with Charles Soule's Trials of the Jedi and the final issue of Kevin Scott's comic book run, the finale or the Beacon. I'm not sure if it's the Beacon hyphen the finale hyphen the Beacon, or if it's a dual title. I'm not sure. I was confused a little bit by that one. But
I think they changed the title. I think it was the Beacon, and then they changed it to the finale.
it's like cool. Um, like with a lot of High Republic had a lot of moving parts to it, which I guess has added to some confusion along the way, but it made all the journey all that much more enjoyable, I guess, for lack of a better word. But before we get going, let's go back to the beginning, to when Project Luminous was announced and we were at Star Wars Celebration. I think it was Celebration Anaheim, right, when that was announced?
Yeah, that sounds right. 2019? Or wait, was it Chicago?
No, 19 was Chicago. 22, it had already been out for a while, I guess, for Anaheim. So yeah, it must have been announced at Chicago.
I think that's when they first teased it, yeah.
Yeah, there was like a thing I think you were there, Alex, that you went to, and like, was it like February, January 2020? Because it was supposed to all start in 2020, right?
Yeah, you're right. Because we went out right before COVID, really hit. And that was in Anaheim. But yeah, 2019, it had to have been when they were teasing it, and they had people go to the booth and write what they were guessing Project Luminous was. So yeah, that was Chicago.
Interesting.
It's crazy how time flies. Like at this point, I don't even know what time is, especially those COVID years. It just feels like they're all one thing that's compressed. It's all interchangeable. I'm just like, there's only pre-COVID and post-COVID. Even though we're still in COVID, guys, COVID's not gone away. Make sure to get your booster shots out there before someone who's anti-vax takes them away. But that's not the conversation today. But yeah, a lot of fun in the speculating side for Project Luminous, because Luminous is a word very closely associated with Yoda and his Force speech and Empire Strikes Back. So I think all the guesses were all over the place. I don't think many people thought that it was going to be what it was, which is this age of the High Republic, couple hundo years before Phantom Menace. People wanted Old Republic. They didn't get that. Maybe you will in the future. Just be patient. But we got something new with a bunch of new characters divided in phases and going back and forwards in time. So it was something that was, at least at the time, I remember being very, very excited for it. So before we kind of delve into what it has ended up being, why don't we just start talking about like our expectations and our excitement level when it was finally formalized that it was going to be like a series of books and comic books and cross media storytelling that was going to span a couple of 100 years. So Laura, why don't you tell us what was your reaction when you found out what Project Luminous was and the announcement for Phase 1?
I mean, I think you already hit the nail on the head in that, like, time is weird and it feels like it's been 1,000 years. But I don't know if I can accurately recall what my feelings were at that time. I'm guessing I probably wasn't as excited, because I remember being more excited about the prospect of going forward in time, and jumping ahead, like past the Skywalker saga, and then learning we were going back in time and being like, oh, I don't know about that. And I also remember after reading Light of the Jedi being like, I'm an idiot. I can't believe I was like upset about the fact that we were going so far back in time in any way, shape, or form, because this is absolutely amazing. So I was proven wrong, and I was proven wrong again and again a couple of times in the High Republic as we moved through it in time. Because even then, when we went back in time to phase two, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that either, and then we did it, and I was like, oh, I like this too. So yeah, Star Wars knows what I want, even if I don't sometimes. But yeah, back then, I'm sure I was just like, I don't know, do we need to go dwell in the past even more? But apparently we did. And it was, for me, that part of it was successful.
Alex, how about for you? How open were you to going into the past?
Oh, I was very open. I was excited about the prospect of just anything that wasn't Skywalker saga adjacent. So yeah, I would have been thrilled if they went forward in the future. I was happy with where they landed because it was something that even Legends didn't really cover that period of time. So it was like, okay, because if they did do the Old Republic, people would constantly be comparing it and
Right.
being like, well, they didn't
Yeah.
do X, Y, or Z. So this was just like a very fresh start, whether you were a canon or a Legends fan, and all new characters, all new situations. Like all of the new stuff is what excited me. And knowing that it was going to be a series of books, like
Hmm.
that's what I missed from the old Legends days, getting the new Jedi Order or the X-Wing novels or even like little trilogies here and there. And we have gotten a handful of trilogies with the new canon stuff, but I wanted a nice long series where we got to know a bunch of new characters. And I was okay. I was just happy that we were getting that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the whole it being a series thing. Because even though I didn't read, unfortunately, for better or worse, like the New Jedi Order books or X-Wing, like you were saying, I do remember, growing up and like having those be in the consciousness, and the because I remember going into Borders, rest in peace, and always seeing like the new release for one of those books and being like, oh yeah, man, one of these days I'll get into that. Lo and behold, I never did. So in this new canon, yeah, I've always been happy with publishing, but always like wondering why we don't have a series of books that just continues a story along the way. And I'm sure that it was, the Skywalker saga blocking something like that because they want to focus on that with the Disney acquisition and all that stuff. So,
As
business
I,
is gonna business.
yeah, I was happy with a lot of publishing. They put out a lot of good books, but so much of it was a tie-in to
Yeah.
Star Wars Rebels or the Skywalker. Like whatever movie was coming out, you'd get a handful of books about that. Thrawn was a great novel, but it was
Yeah.
a tie-in to Star Wars Rebels, and I was like, I just want something that stands on its own.
Yeah, and then trilogies are nice because I mean, I love Alphabet
Yeah,
Squadron, and that's great. But you kind of want, the problem I've had with a lot of the Star Wars trilogy books that we've had throughout the years with the canon publishing effort is just that it feels very one and done. It's just like, here's your trilogy, now let's move to the next thing, and it doesn't let it be part of fandom, if that makes sense, in the way that all those books kind of felt like it did because it just stayed in the collective
yeah,
consciousness a lot longer. Here's just like, I mean, no one's talking about Alphabet Squadron anymore.
right.
And
I
it's a
mean,
shame.
people will say they love it, but
Yeah.
there's no fandom surrounding it the way the High Republic built a whole subset of Star Wars fans.
Which is something that I really appreciate about High Republic and I really want to talk about because once phase one was in the middle of wave two or concluding wave three, it felt that it really generated a massive fandom. And I think in a way that I only remember seeing after like Rebels wrapped up, there was a massive fandom that's, specific to Star Wars Rebels and High Republic really created that. And I remember when we were all on the platform formerly known as Twitter, there was, the big High Republic community, spearheaded by Christina Ariel and all the lovely folks at Lucasfilm, and it was kind of a special time in social media, even though social media is a dumpster fire. So kind of to see how everyone kind of coalesced around. I mean, there's always the haters, but we're not gonna waste time talking about them. But it was very pleasant time to see kind of people just come together and celebrate this multimedia campaign that we hadn't seen since probably Shadows of the Empire, and just embrace it and be like this for light and life community. What was that like for you, Laura? Like seeing, not just reading the books, but then experiencing what the fandom was like.
I mean, that was really everything for me because my sort of community within the Star Wars fandom for a long time was Star Wars Rebels. So back when when that show was on, like that was where I sort of found my place in Star Wars, was on Twitter with the Star Wars Rebels fandom and having all of that enthusiasm around this one, shared thing. And the High Republic was a smaller community than that, but it was still like all the enthusiasm and the energy and the fan art and the debate, it was all still there in the best ways, just in even smaller subsect, which was good and bad in different ways, but worked for me. And I really haven't thought about that for a long time until you just brought that up. So those were good memories, and I still miss like the fan art specifically. We used to get like so much of that on Twitter, and I just don't see as much of it on Blue Sky, to the point where like I have to go to other mediums to find it. And like that's why I like started like pulling up Tumblr again every once in a while just to be like, what are people doing? And like there actually was a decent amount of High Republic fan art that would get posted there. So I had to go seek it out somewhere else. But I miss those days of having one place where we could kind of all hang out and get to discuss in what ended up being a surprisingly civil place, for what we know Twitter to be now and what it became. It didn't used to be like that.
Yeah, and it's something very interesting, and I guess we'll talk about it when we get into phase 3 and how everything concluded. But it definitely feels like and I don't know if it has, or if it's correlated to what happened with High Republic as it got deeper into the lore, or if it was the how social media just fractioned itself, that different people found themselves, either they stayed on Twitter or they went to Blue Sky or they're on Threads or they're on Tumblr. Kind of like, I don't know, that fragmentation of where people kind of ended up on social media is the thing that kind of weakened that strength that fandom had with High Republic. That it kind of, for me, has made phase 3 end a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself, but kind of ended with a little bit of a whimper, because I remember phase 1 being such a celebration of the diversity in Star Wars fandom and people really loving this thing, connecting to it, that it kind of ended, without a celebration in the way that I think it deserved. Alex, what are your thoughts on social media, fandom, and High Republic?
Oh, I think some of that came from Lucasfilm or Disney. I'm not sure who would be in charge of this, but like there was a much bigger push when it started, and I think that helped get the word out and build up a fandom. And I think once they had that, they probably decided that it wasn't worth it to keep. Like they've always had a history, I think, of not pushing their publishing stuff enough. At least as someone who's a big fan of the Star Wars books, I'm like, why aren't you talking about the books more? Like, the main accounts don't post about the book. So I loved when they were doing the High Republic show and really getting the word out. And then I think that some of the marketing just fizzled out. And it didn't keep the conversations going as much. And I agree that online, you didn't see as much continuing talk about every book as they came out. I think I would see people say like, I got my copy, and they'd be excited, and they'd make one post, and then that would be it. And I just didn't see as much conversation. But also, I am off of most platforms far more than I used to be.
Responsible thing to do.
But I think there might be an element of that. Yeah, you talk about people fracturing off of Twitter, and then they went and divided into these other several different places, or people just got burnt out being online for other reasons, and they're just like, I'm not going to go on and talk about this thing today.
And we won't talk about those other reasons today. But going back into High Republic, like we were saying, it's a publishing effort. It's multimedia, but it's still in publishing. We had comic books, YA books, the young readers, novels. We have like the show, Young Jedi Adventures. So it's sprawled across mangas. It's sprawled across it was a wide net of things to be able to read and I don't like to use the word consume, but for lack of a better word, let's just say consume. Consume across a plethora of different ways. So it was one of the exciting things about it. The story continues in all these ways, and we'll be able to see how characters cross over and storylines are tangential, and from this comic book to that story. So it was very exciting to dive into it because it's just like, oh, how am I gonna start reading these books, and how am I gonna read some of the other material that connect into it? So in phase one, like, what was your guys' journey into reading everything, and did you focus on anything in particular? Like, Laura, I'll start with you. Like, did you like, was there like an avenue in which you wanted to kind of stay in and didn't read anything else, or were you pretty much reading everything?
I don't know if I can say I was reading everything at that point. Like I never read the manga. I never really got into like the High Republic Adventures. And I'm not really a comics person to begin with, but I absolutely adored that first run of the High Republic comics that Kevin Scott wrote.
Mhm.
To this day, those are, I think, my favorite comics I've ever read, and I would guess that maybe like Avar Chris is probably a big part of that because she ended up being like a character I really loved and really like attached to. Um, but I mean, for the most part, I think most people probably started with Light of the Jedi,
Mhm.
and it took me a while to actually like start that book. I remember reading, like trying to get into the first chapter and kind of not really connecting with it, and that's when that may have been around the time that I sort of finally discovered audiobooks,
Mhm.
because that was pandemic era, and I just my attention span, my mental state, like everything just went completely out the window. So getting into audiobooks and just having that medium as I would like be sitting around in my apartment doing puzzles, because that was like the indoor activity of choice in my household when the pandemic hit and we were all in lockdown. Um, that and then like doing home projects and stuff, I would do all of those things around my apartment with my headphones on, listening to The Light of the Jedi. And I remember the first time, like just sitting around, probably doing a puzzle, listening to that first chapter, being like, how did I not get into this? Like while I was actually reading it, because this is absolutely devastating. That
Mhm.
first opening chapter of Light of the Jedi, like I'll never forget. Like I remember just like stopping what I was doing and just being like, oh, I actually have to like sit here and listen to this, because what is about to happen is going to hit really hard. And that was crazy because like these are a bunch of characters that we don't know. We haven't like learned anything about them. This is our first introduction, and it was really that first chapter. It's
Mhm.
kind of our last, meeting with that group too.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just devastating. It's just wild how like just that short little chapter, like that's all it took for me to like get attached and get in the zone and be fully drawn in 100% into the High Republic just from that moment. But yeah, for me it was the adult run I did, or the adult run comics, the adult books, the young adult books, and then a couple of the one-off or like comics I would read some of those too, but I kind of steered clear for the most part of a lot of the middle grade and younger stuff.
Yeah, I feel like I was pretty much the same. I had the same journey in terms of like what I decided to connect with. Because from the onset, I'm just like, this is too much. I don't have time. I can barely get any any reading in. So yeah, adult YA and the main Cavan comic run were like the three. I'm just like, this is what I'm committing to. Everything be damned. And if I miss what I miss, I missed it. And apparently I missed a lot. But we'll talk to that about that later, especially on phase three. But Alex, what about you? Did you skip anything? I would imagine
I
maybe not.
don't think so. I think I read there. I don't think I got all of the short stories in from Star Wars Insider. Uh, Although they have them collected now, so I probably can get my 100% completionist badge. But I still, even though I read everything, would say that I was focused mostly on the adult novels. Those were the ones that I was excited when a new adult novel was coming out. I was like, I remember Book of Boba Fett was on the way, but
Mhm.
also The Fallen Star, and I was like way more hyped for The Fallen Star. But Laura, I had like a very similar reaction to you for Light of the Jedi. I remember it was when I first had it, I was like, I'm gonna start it. It's like 11 at night, but I'm excited. I'm just gonna start this book, read a chapter or two, and then I read a third of it because you just let that first opening part of that book is like I can't stop reading this.
Yeah.
It was so good. But I'm also not really a comics person. I read all the Star Wars comics, but that's just to keep up with things more than like I don't read any other comics
Mhm,
outside
mhm.
of Star Wars. So I agree that I think Cavan Scott's runs were amazing. I thought Trail of Shadows was fantastic.
That was
I
good.
loved that one. And then, some of the young adult novels still, they were more hit or miss for me. But then you had like Tears of the Nameless, or I feel like Path of Deceit and Path of Vengeance. Those were the two that were more central to what was going on. In phase 2. So while my focus was adult novels, I read all of it.
Did you feel a sense? Did you feel overwhelmed by reading everything, or was there like, or were you like, oh man, this? I feel satisfied with like how everything is kind of tying in together.
I definitely enjoyed reading everything, and I felt like it was a rewarding experience. But I mean, that Star Wars is. I'm very fortunate that Star Wars is my full-time job. I do not understand how people who have real jobs are also completionists. Like, how did they read everything? Because I felt like every time I finished a book, they're like, "Well, a new one just came out," and I'm like, "Okay, just keep on going, no breaks."
Like, I feel like I'm drowning right now because I just finished Trials of the Jedi. Now I'm reading Wayseeker, and I still have oh my god, I forget what the Crystal Crown there on the shelf, so I can do that. So I'm still in my in the post High Republic high. I'm like, okay, let's like read now these other High Republic books that tie into Acolyte. I'm just like, oh my god, like I'm enjoying it, but it is a lot because I'm just like feel like I get out of work so I can read on the bus, so I can get home, have dinner, and then maybe read a chapter or two before going to bed, and then start the day all over again. So I feel like I'm like, oh my god,
it's so rare that I read a non-Star Wars
and
book
have
at
hobbies.
This point. Yeah,
it's a lot. It's definitely a full-time job. But I definitely felt sometimes punished because I remember we were at Dragon Con one year, and there was one question about the High Republic that I was absolutely sure about because I had just read the. I think it was the first one of the first YA of Phase 2.
Path of Deceit.
Path of Deceit, and we know that Marta or was it the second one where she starts the Path of the Closed Fist or whatever the fuck it was.
This was the trivia Dragon Con. They had a question on there. Okay.
And I had just read the book, so I'm like, yeah, Marta wrote. Obviously, we just read the book. Bam, let's do it. I'm gonna get into the final, and all of a sudden, the question was wrong because apparently the right answer was in the Star Wars Insider short story or something, or in a book that hadn't been published in a short story. And I'm just like, this is not cool. Like the fact that like it feels like I need to do gymnastics here to feel like I know what's going on. I felt punished at that time.
I vaguely remember discussing that question after the fact. I think I got it right, but I remember being like, that was a weirdly worded question.
It was definitely unfair. I'm just gonna say, I know Dragon Con trivia is supposed to be hard, but I felt like the High Republic. I didn't feel the light in life. I felt the Drengir just sucked the life out of me on that one. But before we move to Phase 2, because I think Phase 2 is extremely interesting. What were y'all's overall thoughts on Phase 1? Let's for the most part stick with novels and YA because otherwise we'll never finish this conversation. But with Light of the Jedi, Rising Storm, Fallen Star, like what were your experience like reading waves, all these waves of Phase 1? Laura, start with you.
I actually really liked Fallen Star, and I remember being absolutely like flabbergasted when that book came out, and the fandom had a very strong reaction to it, and there was a little bit of negativity and a lot of anger, and I think a lot of grief there that
definitely grief
sort of exploded on the internet. And I just remember being really surprised, and this is probably because I never felt a particular like attachment to Stellan Gios. Like I liked him as a character. I thought he was interesting, but I thought that was a really I thought that was a really fitting way for him to go down. I thought it made a lot of sense. But if that had been like the character that I like clung on to from the beginning, and then that happened, I probably would have been really upset and screaming on the internet too. So I get where people are coming from, or were coming from at that time, but I just remember being surprised because I really liked that book. And I had not experienced the fandom reading a Claudia Gray novel and not being really happy with it. So it was just an interesting time in the Star Wars fandom. But yeah, overall, Phase 1, and then in the adult books, I love that the Rising Storm, we sort of got like a focus on Elzar Mann. I mean, from that moment on, I always thought he was like a really interesting character. So I'm glad that we sort of got book that was a little bit more focused on him. And that adult comic run, I mean, I have to mention like Ario Anindito did a lot of the art, most if not like at least half of those first 12 issues were my absolute favorite. And I think it was a big part of his artwork in those, because those were my lock screens for a while. Like some of those like splash pages, just absolutely gorgeous.
That one of Avar, like entering the Nile ship near the end of the run, and like Skier and Keever behind her. Oh, so good.
With the green behind her. Oh, yeah, absolutely gorgeous. I mean, that right there is artwork. So yeah, overall I was really pleased with how phase 1 played out. If I had been a massive Stellan Geos fan, I can totally understand how that would maybe not be the case though.
Interesting, because I had and I must preface this by saying that I enjoyed it, right? Just because I'm going to start saying things that I did not vibe with doesn't mean that I did not enjoy it as a whole, because I do think that phase 1, to me, is like the best phase of all the High Republic as it stands currently, because we'll see what phase more has in store. But I did feel like it got far too masochistic for its own good, because like it's just like loose, and even through phase 3, it's just like you're just getting beat down so much, and it was like, Jesus Christ, man! Like the Jedi didn't even get this beat down during the prequels. Not even Order 66 was this brutal. So like, I don't know. It felt very, to me, very. It felt like I was watching Pinhead come down with the Cenobites, just laying waste to the Jedi, because it was so brutal. And the fact that Starlight Beacon, which for me was one of the most interesting concepts of the High Republic, like this, station that is a Jedi temple that's going out to give aid. I'm just like, and the design of it so spectacular that I was just like invested in it from day one, and then to just have it destroyed, which I understand why they're doing it, right? Like, it makes sense in terms of the story and like what the motivations for Markion is and everything, but it just feels so gratuitous to me, especially getting rid of my girl Orla, because Orla was my favorite character probably.
Oh, fantastic.
And then just having her, and I will say it, unceremoniously killed in Fallen Star.
Like
I was
off screen.
I'm just like, what is this? Like, she's the best, and now we don't even get to at least suffer her death. Like, let me suffer the way we suffered Loden, Great Storm, So I don't know, like having 3 books that are just they're just punching, kicking you in the crotch, like one after the other. I mean, it's like, come on, man, you gotta let me breathe a little bit. So I felt that it was a lot of masochism for just the sake of setting up stakes, which I felt maybe was a little too much. But that's just me. Alex, how did you feel with phase 1?
I loved phase 1. I agree. I think it's my favorite. I think Loden's death hit so hard. That was like flawlessly executed. I remember reading that on my Kindle and just seeing that like, you have 10 minutes left in this book, and like every time I would turn the page, I kept looking down. It's like 99%, 2 minutes left, and I'm like, come on, just make it. And like the last page, I'm like, shit, like threw my Kindle down. Like, I loved it so much. The other deaths, like Orla, like Stellan, they didn't land as well for me. And knowing that Stellan was meant to be one of the core 3 characters, and then he was only in 2 books, and then he dies. And I know that wasn't planned, but Claudia was like, I think this is what we need. I think that's what's best for this book. I do kind of feel like, I wish we had more time with Stellan. I wish we had a little more time with Orla. I think my biggest criticism of all the High Republic, I'm like, I feel like each phase could have used one more wave. One, like a little more time with some of those characters to let some of these things breathe, because it is very nonstop. I don't know what I would have thrown in. Like, I do appreciate that they wrote a very efficient, fast-paced story, but yeah, I think a little extra time, or maybe letting the books be a little longer, would have been beneficial.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, because I do feel that especially with going into phase 3, right? There's a lack of focus in many ways with like the books about who is, the character that's anchoring a lot of this. Because yeah, we thought it was Stellan, but then it moves into
And
Elzar, and then we think it might be Avar, but then Avar's in the comics, and then she comes back. So there's a lot of everyone's moving around a lot. Especially in the YA stuff. There's like a lot of different
yeah,
protagonists in YA. By the time we Trials of the Jedi and we're like wrapping up specific character storylines, you're like, oh, okay, but like, how did we get to this point, and why is this character the one that matters for this? I was just thinking, since you were mentioning Loden, I was just thinking about Bell, and Bell's one of the great characters that I really have liked his journey. But when we get to phase 3, and like he's the one that faces, Mark and Rose, spoiler alerts, it definitely narratively makes sense because of what he went through with losing Loden. But since we don't spend a lot of time with him all the time, it kind of doesn't feel earned at the end, because he's just like an incidental character that we know what he's going through, but since we don't spend a lot of time with him, doesn't feel like by the end of it, it feels like we spent enough time with him for it to feel like it mattered. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's something else that I think phase 1, we know that they had the broad strokes of this whole story mapped out, and phase 1 felt like the cast hadn't really grown out of control.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like there were a lot of characters, but not too many. Reading everything, it made sense.
Yeah.
Release order made sense. They connected well. I do feel like as we got into phase 2 and phase 3, it just kept growing and growing. And I was like, oh, this is getting a little out of control.
It started to get to be like too much to manage, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think about phase 1 and I think about how well, like, they had such good character management in phase 1. And phase 2, I think I can argue that they did there too. But once we got to phase 3 and you had so many, like, by the time we were finished with Trials of the Jedi, I was just like, yeah, but what happened to this character, and this? Like, it's just like there were too many. There were too many cooks in the kitchen by the time we got to phase 3, and there was not.
I was the opposite. I wasn't thinking about the characters that they left out. I was just thinking like, who the hell was this? And just going to Wikipedia, and figuring out who anyone was.
But it's still like character management. I don't think was as successful in phase 3. I thought phase 1 was incredibly successful in that respect.
Yeah. So that's phase. I mean, obviously, we can be talking about a lot of phase 1 for a long time, because there's so many characters and so many storylines, and particularly the Drengir. But we'll talk about Drengir, I guess, in phase 3. But let's move now into phase 2, which I don't think a lot of people expected it to do the Star Wars trilogy treatment of like, we're in the present, but we're gonna go to the past so that we can go to the end type of thing. But instead of going back maybe a couple of years, maybe a couple of decades, it decides to go back. What was it? 100, 150 years into the past, so that we can see the groundwork of High Republic conflict. But to me, I don't know about you guys, but for me, it felt very confusing when they announced that. And as I was reading, I was just like, I struggled a little bit with phase 2, which to me is my least favorite. Not to say that it's bad, but it's my least favorite of the 3, because I just, I felt like it just, for me, wasn't cohesive enough in terms of doing the story that it needed to tell to pay off into phase 3. So what was everyone's experience with phase 2 once they announced it and they started digging in? Laura, start with you, since I know you're a bigger fan of phase 2 than most people I have discussed this with.
Yeah, I kind of got that impression too. I really enjoyed phase 2, and I think it was because I had the two heirs whose names I'm not remembering, of Iram and Arano. I really loved their story, the sort of like Romeo and Juliet of two like separate houses kind of coming together. I thought that they were really intriguing, and I just really enjoyed them. And then the fact that you had like Gela, this Jedi Knight, and this like Prince of Coruscant that had this sort of, not necessarily like a romantic relationship, but just kind of constantly at odds. Like their relationship built in what I thought was like a really satisfying, interesting, and different way. So the reason I love any story for the most part is it's almost entirely character based. Like the story can be doing whatever, like, but as long as your characters are like interesting and intriguing to me, I'm fully on board. And I think that phase 2, for me at least, was really successful in that you had really interesting characters with really interesting character dynamic, like, relationships that I really carried me through and kept me like wanting to come back for more.
Alex, what was your experience?
I was kind of like you, Goose, not enthused that they were saying we're going to jump back in time because they ended with all these cliffhangers. And I'm like, oh, but where's Burry? Is he okay? And I know that they wanted us to sit with that for a while. And one of my favorite celebration memories is we got to grab some drinks with some of the authors, and Molly yelled at Charles Soule about doing that to us, and he just started dancing. Like they wanted us to be worried and to feel that. He's like, as long as you're feeling something, we're happy. So they wanted us to have that cliffhanger. But yeah, to me, it felt like it kind of took some of the momentum away because we're having to meet a bunch of new characters, and we're getting some extra context about the Nameless and where the Nile came from, but it didn't seem as impactful for me. And then even a lot of the stuff like going to Planet X for the first time, which I'm so glad they finally gave it a real name, but going there for the first time was really cool, really interesting, but then so different from, I don't know, returning to it in Trials of the Jedi felt different. And I was almost like, oh, I don't know that like we needed to have seen it already. And I was expecting to learn a little more about like the Underdweller and the Protector, and there are dots that I can connect lines to, but yeah, Phase 2 is something that I have to really go back and think about and remember. Like I almost gloss over Cataclysm and Convergence. Like even though I also loved Axel and a lot of those characters, but I more think about the Path books. The comic, I liked Cavan's comic again. The High Republic Adventures comic felt like it was doing its own thing that wasn't very well connected with everything else. It just felt less cohesive to me.
Yeah, and as you were, and as both of you have been talking, especially you, Laura, mentioning the adult novels and what was compelling about them, I think that I agree. Like, I think if they hadn't been part of Phase 2, I would have liked them as standalone books in a way that I feel like they maybe should have been faced more. You know, it's like, let's just go back to this era and like discover like these characters and just focus on them and this pocket of their story, because like you said, I feel like it wasn't, since the connections to Phase 1 and Phase 3 weren't that heavy with them. And I guess it's a problem of our expectations as readers, right? Because if the publishing efforts telling us that we're going to go into Phase 2 because we're going to discover all these things that are going to pay off into Phase 3, then our expectations are about like, okay, let's focus on reading this so we're paid off in Phase 3 and see what all these connective threads are going to be like. And when that doesn't happen, I feel like it takes away like how you're experiencing and enjoying the book. And I feel like if I had read those books isolated and without having, expecting how they're going to continue together and tie back into Phase 1 and then pay off into Phase 3, I would have enjoyed them far more, I think, because then I could have just appreciated them for themselves instead of like how they fit into the narrative. So like, that's why this whole Face More thing I'm intrigued by, because you can tell stories like that, which is why I'm really enjoying Wayseeker right now. It's a smaller story, very tied to High Republic, and then tying into obviously the Acolyte, but it's very character driven and intimate, and I dig it for what it is in that regard. But Phase 2, like I think the YA books were the standouts for me because they did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of how they're connecting, and even the second one, the name escapes me, like which is showing the Night of Sorrow, the final battle that they have. I feel like the way that the YA book shows that battle is so much more effective than Cataclysm.
It was cool getting two like versions of it. And even in the manga did another perspective, so you could kind of build the Night of Sorrow. And I think what Cataclysm was more in the tunnels and Path of Vengeance was more outside. I think I can't remember exactly which, but you got to see the battle from different perspectives, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about like the sort of tie-ins and the connections with Phase 2 and how it kind of connected to the rest of it, and Yeah, you've got Dalna and the Night of Sorrows, you've got the Roe family, you've got Planet X, but like some of the stuff with like, I mean, with like Iram and Arano, I feel like a lot of that kind of didn't go anywhere. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Like, I don't
No,
know how much that actually like really connected to
it's
phases
just
1 and 2.
the
Besides the
planets that
fact,
showed up in phase
yeah,
one.
besides the fact that they were just like locations that the
Right.
names were repeated. I mean, like you had like the Captain America shield shows up in phase 2, and then we get that payoff. Like that's kind of one of the main things, I guess. I say that I love phase 2, but in retrospect, I'm not sure, knowing what we know now, if losing that momentum was the right call. If going back in time and pausing, like it actually would have, I think it would have been more interesting if they had sort of started laying those breadcrumbs that we got in phase 2, like ahead of the High Republic. If you had like made that its own sort of thing where we're jumping back in time, and you maybe you read those books, maybe you didn't, but like you read it before the High Republic and then those things showed back up, that would have been more interesting. But I don't know. It's hard to say because like I said, I liked phase 2. I just don't know if losing that momentum was the right call.
I think I would have liked phase 2 if Goose, like you said, that we're getting this phase more. But yeah, if they had done phases 1 and then 3, basically like here's the whole story of these characters, and then they were like, now we're gonna do like some more context, and like we've mentioned the Night of Sorrow, we've talked about Dalna quite a bit, and we're gonna see more about Iram and Aaron. Like I think that would have worked better for me when the story wrapped up and they're like, now we're gonna jump back in time. I'd have been like, oh cool, we're gonna see the origins of the Nameless and the Nile. Like I think that would have just worked better for me.
Or just have like a phase 2 that was not so much back in time, you know, like maybe it was, I don't know, I don't know how, when Asgard Row lived, but around that time, so we can see how Asgard and Markian as a kid and like how they're developing the Nile and everything. So we start seeing more of those threats much more directly with characters that we already are familiar with, so that the threads to phase 1 are a little clearer, right? Because then, we go back into this different version of phase 2 150 years ago, and we then see the payoffs from this new phase 2 into that one, but kind of have a more direct line, if that makes sense, into everything with the Nile, because I felt the path of the open hand, as interesting as it was, it all of a sudden it's just like, okay, now we're the path of the closed fist or whatever they're called, and just believe me, we turn into the Nile. It's like, oh, okay, I trust you. You have no reason to lie to me. But it was very jarring, to the point where I'm just like, like, okay, so what phase 3? So this was just a parenthesis, and now we're just gonna keep going as if this didn't happen. I mean, I know we had all the Rod of Ages and the Staff of the Seasons and all these things, but which to me, I'm just like, I know some people might like it, but to me, like some of those things seemed hokey to me. When like Star Wars gets a little too magical, I'm just like, what? Like what is this? I don't know. How did you guys react to some of those things?
Here's what I think I would have liked more. And I get the sense that Aslan Rel was not going to be that important until they got to phase 3. But if he were the focus of phase 2, because at the end of Path of Deceit, he is investigating Kevmo's death. So if he were like the central character that we followed, and we got to watch him lose his mind and experience the Nameless, and then there was a tease that was him at the end of Midnight Horizon. If they had just said like, this is Aslan Rel, and then we jump back and we get this guy's story, then we're in phase 3 and we're watching him be like, he's still alive, he's completely insane. Like I think that would have connected all those threads a little better.
Yeah, because I remember reading Shadows of Starlight, and I really liked that miniseries. But when he shows up at the end, I'm like, who? Like who are you? Like I had to go to Wikipedia, and then Wikipedia said that he was at Midnight Horizon. I was like, when?
Just
when?
barely, yeah.
And it's like, who are we talking about? And so it's again one of those moments where I felt punished for not reading everything instead of rewarded, which should be, you should feel rewarded, not punished for reading those things.
I think Aslan was one of those creations that they made him, and then they just kind of like fell in love with him as they went, and they were like, we're going to make him more and more important. And he's one of my favorite characters in the whole initiative. I love him.
I mean, from what I haven't read the mangas or the other things that he has been a part of, but from what I saw in Phase 3, definitely good and compelling. So I'm excited that, spoiler alert, he survived, and Wreath is trying to find him. So I think that's going to be a really interesting story to continue with. But to wrap up with Phase 2, one of the things that was frustrating about it was at the end of the battle, Yoda just decides to cover it up. And I'm just like, man, what is this? It made me very angry about Phase 1, because I was like, you know what this is then? Like, what's this whole running around thing when you already know what it was? Which made Phase 3 also frustrating, because I'm just like, so you're just not gonna tell anyone that you knew about this.
Which phase was it where he was just like doing a bake sale or baking competition or something?
Phase 1, I think.
That was Phase 1? Okay, so yeah. So
he knows what's going on, and he's just
like,
baking away.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Like, yeah, okay, dude. I had a big problem with that too, the cover up. I'm like, honestly, it does kind of make sense though, like for Yoda as a character, like as we know him, I think that kind of tracks, but it did make me mad. Like, there's so much you could have done.
If you had said it was Gerald Poof that did the cover up, I'm like, okay, he's kind of kooky. He forgot. Yeah, like he's just
he forgot.
He's like, I can see that, especially with the Gerald Poof that lives in my mind, which is the robot chicken version. And it's like, I can vibe with Gerald just like not telling anybody, because he's never thought about telling anybody about it. But Yoda, I'm just like, bro, I know it's supposed to be a bad look for you, but it's a bad look that you just kept a secret forever.
Yeah, so, but I think it does track with the prequels and Mace and Yoda discussing, should we tell the Senate that there's someone messing with the Jedi and our powers are diminished, and like Yoda and Mace know about the rule of 2, which seemingly no one else does. Like, I thought it all actually did mesh well, especially when the Acolyte came out and people were going like, well, if they ran into this person with a red lightsaber, why does Ki-Adi-Mundi think, or why does he say that the Sith have been dead for a millennium? It's like, because Ki-Adi-Mundi is
always wrong.
Classically wrong. He's always wrong. And like, other Jedi lied to him. Like, that's possible. Ki-Adi-Mundi is not the arbiter of what is concrete truth.
He's quite the opposite. In fact,
whatever he says, believe the opposite.
Yeah. Well, and he's a victim of withheld information too. We're all in the same boat here with him.
He likes shaved ice without any flavoring. So it's like, can you really trust anybody like that?
We're going like, this is just a complete tangent, but we went to the Ren Fair. I think this past year, the year before, it was right around when that book came out, and one of my friends got just ice with no flavoring, and I took a picture of it and I tagged John Jackson Miller in it. He was like, yes.
Hell yeah. That was such a good thing to just put in that book, because it's such a small thing that I think that
ice is a flavor.
Everyone just latched onto, and it's just a meme at this point. But before we move into Phase 3, any final thoughts on Phase 2? About let's do a compliment sandwich. We've been kind of talking about the things that didn't work, so why don't we just say like the things that we thought were great about Phase 2? I'll exclude myself from this.
I didn't read the Phase 2 comics. I tried and just couldn't really get into them, but I like that they brought back Tesseract into Phase 3. I thought that worked really well, and I thought he was really delightful. I think one of the reasons I didn't like Phase 2 comics was because he was just really annoying in them. And he's far less annoying in Phase 3.
He's more mature, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that he was sort of a through line a little bit there. He was just fun. And I liked the audio drama a lot in Phase 2 that George Mann did about the Battle of Jedha. It was just kind of, that book just did not stop. It was just, there was so much action on Jedha, and I just really enjoyed that. Overall, I would love to go back and revisit some of these characters and just kind of pick up with them and see where they're at. Like, I want to know when Gela went way seeking, how did that go? Where did she end up? Like, did her and Axel ever reconnect at some point later in life? There's just some things with some of these characters, whether they tied into Phase 1 and 3 at all, which a lot of them did not. It doesn't really matter to me. I just thought they were interesting. I'd like to know more.
Alex, what are your positive thoughts? I'm going to be the negative Nancy on this one.
I also really dug Cavan Scott's High Republic comic in this phase. There was a moment where Vildar is trapped, and he's trying to keep a building from falling on him and a bunch of members of the Path of the Open Hand, and the Guardians of the Wills are coming, trying to like get Rubble off, and they all start chanting, oh shit, what does Chirrut say? Like,
and one with the force of forces,
and the forces with me. Like, they're all chanting that together, even the members of the Path, and they're like giving Vildar. It's very Dragon Ball Z. Like, lend me your power. Yeah, but I thought that moment was awesome. I really liked Vildar. I already talked about Axel Greylark. I thought he was a great character. So thrilled that he found some redemption and atonement and did not die. I'll always applaud Star Wars when they do that. Don't let him do
like,
one
stop
good
killing
thing
mothers and let people redeem themselves.
I thought everything when they went to Planet X for the first time was really cool and intriguing. The Nameless throughout this whole initiative, every time they popped up, I was on board and I was invested. I liked the lightsaber shield. I thought that was something cool. I'm glad Reef now has it.
Yeah.
There were a lot of like little details that they built out the Jedi and the world building and all these planets that I dug. And yeah, the Battle of Jedha was really cool.
Good. I'm always happy to hear positivity.
Oh, and I'll just say, like, all of the new authors. I really enjoyed all the new writers that came on board.
Zoraida. Agreed.
You know, she's an OG. Yeah, which is something that I want to ask everyone's opinion about. The diversity of the authors is great, but I wonder if the quantity was too much maybe to handle, but we'll talk about that in phase 3, which we're moving into now. Phase 3, which just concluded. In many ways, you know, everyone was kind of expecting this to be like the grand finale of the initiative. And I think for some people, it really hit home because I saw a lot of positive reactions on Blue Sky for like how everything culminated, especially with Trials of the Jedi. But the fanfare, like we were talking about at the beginning, was just kind of not there, especially for the ending of this massive initiative, the first one of its kind with the new Lucas, with the new Disney ownership of Lucasfilm. So, what were y'all's impression of how Phase 3 went and how High Republic ended? Or maybe we leave how High Republic ended for later, but how Phase 3 went. Laura, what was your experience?
I thought it had really great momentum right up until the very end. And I didn't care for the end of it, but getting to that point, like the journey of getting to Trials, I enjoyed most, if not all of it. I loved getting to see Avar behind enemy lines in Eye of Darkness. I just thought that was like it was just different, and it was a nice break from the fact that like she was kind of relegated to the comics in phase 1. So I think a lot of people got their intro of her in Light of the Jedi and then didn't have a lot to go off of after that point. So I thought that was a good move to actually bring her back in and sort of like, let's put her in a book and centralize her and like get kind of have everybody check in with where she's at. And we got to like explore a little bit of like what she experienced in terms of her struggle with the dark side. Everybody can acknowledge that like, yeah, like Elzar has struggled with that. We get it. But like Avar did too. Like she had her moments in that comic. And so I'm glad that they sort of brought some of that story and had her reliving some of those and trying to like move forward from that in Eye of Darkness. Temptation of the Force is probably, it has to be like one of my favorite books I've ever read, actually. Like I absolutely head over heels loved that book. I knew I was going to love that book, and I had such high expectations going into it to the point where I'm like, there's no way it's going to meet them. It so far exceeded them. I loved that book top to bottom. Would happily reread it again anytime. And I think because I had such an attachment to like Avar and Elzar, especially after that moment, like Trials just didn't sit well with me, the end of it. So part of me kind of wishes that I had just stopped after Temptation of the Force. I think I would have been happier not knowing where things went from there, especially with them in particular.
And we'll get to how things wrapped up.
Yeah, but I also read the adult comics in phase 3, and I read the young adult books, which weren't quite as memorable for me, but the comics, I think, for whatever reason, didn't hit as hard. I really I love Keeve Trennis as a character, and I'm glad that we kind of got to pick up her story, but even like her story, the ending also just kind of didn't work for me. So that all of the momentum right up until the end, everything worked, loved the journey, was fully there for it. I wish I could say that everything ended happily for me in terms of reaction, but I'm just not there, sadly.
Alex, how about you? I know we've talked about it a little bit, but like, what are your thoughts overall?
Yeah, kind of similar. I mean, I was enthused and excited every time a new wave was coming out, every time a new adult book, especially. Like, I really liked Eye of Darkness. I was just excited every single time. I agree that I do feel like it just got to be too much. Too much. I remember when they were starting to introduce the Blight, and I was like, what?
Oh, right.
Like,
one more thing.
Yeah, I think the idea of the Blight is really interesting, but it just seemed like there's another thing we have to deal with. There are more and more characters. The fact that they like just kept on introducing characters, I was like, it's getting to be too big, and we're losing focus. And yeah, I very much agree with the main comic. Like, it just felt, I don't know, seeing that Keeve had been knighted or made a master off screen, and then knowing that she was going to leave the order. There were a lot of little things that I could see her pushing back against what the Jedi were doing. She was named Marshal of the Defense Fleet and did not want to be. There were definitely issues that I saw she had, but I didn't feel like her leaving packed a big punch for me the way that I wanted it to.
And I do because of all the buildup that it had, because everyone's just like, oh, this showed up in Dooku Lost, I think. So everyone's like, oh my god, what's going to happen to Keeve? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, she left.
I do think I do think part of it was my own expectation for thinking that this would be a huge climactic moment. And same with all of the High Republic, knowing that, okay, well, the Jedi are very different when we see them in the prequels. So I kind of thought that there would be a big, obvious, like, neon sign saying this is the beginning of the end for the Jedi. And I think they were just more subtle with it. And so that's more like my expectations versus what they had in mind. But I do think Phase 3 is my second favorite of the phases. Because Tears of the Nameless was a banger. I loved that book. And I did really enjoy reading all of the adult novels. But it just got to be, there's so much to deal with and so many characters to remember. And I felt like most of the conclusion had to happen in Trials of the Jedi. And I was like, this book needs to be 800 pages long.
Yep. That's where I landed too.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long. And I felt satisfied enough with the end of it. I'm looking forward to talking about the end with Laura, because I was like, I felt satisfied, but I was picking it up hoping to feel like I did at the end of Light of the Jedi and The Rising Storm, and I didn't feel that good. But those are two of my absolute favorite Star Wars books.
It was interesting because I remember being very excited for Phase 3 after after Phase 2 just didn't do it for me, which is not an indictment on its quality. It's just an indictment about how I connected with it. So I was excited just to be back with the characters that kicked everything off, and everyone that I in particular connected with, and see how that journey was going to end. So I was I was ready to get on that train and go wherever it took me. And it started off with a bang, like Shadows of Starlight, that miniseries. It was 4 issues, I think. That was really, really awesome to read. Although I think there was literally in the fine print a part of it that should have just told me like what some of this experience was going to be like for me reading the rest of Phase 3. It was the one panel that shows how Belle rescued Burry, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, here we go, we're gonna find out. And all of a sudden there's a little footnote that says, to find out how this story happened, go and read the For Light and Life thing. And it's like, Jesus Christ. Like, you know how much money I've sent Inkstone and Goldsboro on like all these special editions? Just let me know how he saved them. So again, another moment where I felt punished by the High Republic for not spending more money on the books. But regardless, shout out to Starlight, great. I mean, I really loved, especially with the Guardian protocols and like
Yeah.
seeing how the lightsabers are not ornate anymore because we just have to produce them.
And to
just
say, like, build off of what I just said about them being a little more subtle, the Guardian protocols were not subtle. That and
oh,
the lightsaber, like, none of that was subtle, and I loved it. I thought
yeah,
that was
it was
great.
so good, and I thought that that was gonna be the vibe moving forward with the rest of the phase, and at least for me, it just wasn't. For me, it just felt like, I mean, obviously there's standout books here and there, like you said, Tears of the Nameless. I think it's the standout book of the adult and YA stuff, at least for me. Because everything else just felt like not just homework for us as readers, but it just felt like assignment for the authors. Like I just felt like everyone was tired, or they just didn't want to do this anymore, but they were contractually obligated to just finish the books because like a lot of the books just felt to me like, okay, I gotta hit these plot points and I gotta fill everything out. So it didn't have like the weight of of the literary quality that Phase One or Phase Two had. It just felt very like, okay, we just gotta move on to the next one so that we can move on into Trials of the Jedi, which for me made for a very frustrating reading experience because I wasn't invested in things. It felt like I was reading an expanded Wikipedia article in many ways. But I have to give props where props are due because I think that it speaks to the quality of a writer that Charles Soule is. Because as frustrating as Trials of the Jedi is to read, because it tries to weave in so many things together, I think that the quality of writing in that book is very, very good. However, the Blight is something that I was very upset about. This is just another thing, like you said, Alex, that we have to worry about. And it's just like, why don't you just like the Drengir? Why don't you just like not have them be disappeared? I know they break them back and I think it's in Tears or in Defiance or the last one, but they also get rid of them immediately. But it's just one of those things where it's just like, I thought Acolyte told us that there hadn't been wars or major conflicts, but the minute you bring in world-ending dust, that is a major conflict. So it just felt like it was getting too big and too complicated, and the stakes were far too high for an era that I thought that the stakes were supposed to be a little more contained. I don't know if anyone felt uh, how their emotions were complicated by having the stakes be this high. Laura, like, how did you feel about the Blight and this, or the Drengir or anything? Do you feel like the stakes were appropriate for Phase Three, or do you feel like they could have been higher? Or
I think that they were pretty high. I think, and I was fine with that. And I think what needed to happen though was that in order to have all of these things build out the way that I sort of wished they had in terms of like the emotional punch, one of you said it earlier, but like we just needed like one more book, like one more like story in Phase 3. I think would have let some of these things breathe a little bit. I think that maybe there was something that could have kind of been improved there. But in terms of like the Drengir, the Blight, the Nameless, having all of those things kind of happening at once, that's not one of the things I had an issue with. There were a lot of things I had issues with as the High Republic came to a close. That wasn't really one of them. Besides the Drengir kind of becoming resolved in Tears of the Nameless, that book was a little bit forgettable for me. It just kind of didn't hit as much. And it's funny because I don't think any of us realized at the time when we were reading it that like that is our goodbye to Avon Staros. That is the last that we see of her that I know of.
Yeah, Into the Light, that one.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, because I agree that one I was like, this feels like a little side mission that doesn't. Yeah, and I love Wreath, I love Aslan, but yeah, Into the Light didn't land for me.
Yeah, it was very strange, especially because that wasn't Claudia Gray. So I'm just like, Claudia Gray delivering mid. I'm just like,
And yeah, Avon Staros, like, goodbye to her.
It's like, bye, I guess. Thanks.
Yeah, see ya, I guess at some point. I don't know. Like, yeah, there was a lot of it that would kind of didn't land for me. But I liked that we had a lot of stakes and a lot of stories, and I liked the sort of, we'll get to Trials, but I liked the interlude of that book where we
Yes.
had like the people dealing with the blight. Like it didn't feel too much for me, but I could totally get how people might feel like that there were too many adversaries at that point in phase 3.
Plus the occlusion zone, let's not forget, you know, we had a
Which
full
was, like,
cruiser smash into it, which is
coming
like,
up
Jesus.
and coming down. It's going online, it's going offline. I'm just like, oh my God, I don't care anymore. Is it up or down? I don't know.
And then in the final book, all of a sudden it's down, and you don't know why it's. I mean, we know it's down because of Markion destroying the Gay Selector, but you're like, wait, what? Like,
that's
down? Like, what?
Comparing phase 3 to phase 1 and how things were released and events happened and would be explained or followed up on in the next book or comic or whatever. In phase 3, hearing in several stories, like I think Into the Light, no, it wasn't, but several stories talked about how the storm wall had come down. And I was like, I was going on Wikipedia, like, when did that happen? And I was like, surely, okay, the next book is probably going to explain that. And it kept on not explaining it until Trials of the Jedi, which I do think was a really cool moment of having Markion do it by like destroying his own ship and stranding himself on Sophros. I was like, okay, awesome. But I have been confused for months at this point. And yeah, it just didn't, there were too many threads. I had no problem with the Blight being a thing. And I think it's cool to have a big existential threat for the Jedi to solve at the end, but it did just, like I said, one more book would have helped.
They drew it out too much because I'm just like, hey, I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in this room, and I still was just like, yeah, the Blight might be connected to the Nameless. I think this is pretty safe assumption. Let's not, you know.
Reith is doing all this research, and I'm like, come on, man.
It's like, come on, the proof is in the pudding. Come on, it's the same husk. Let's do this. So there was a lot of moments like that where I feel like some things needed to be faster and some things needed to be drawn out. So like there was a lot of whiplash, but Battle of Eriadu was a big whiplash for me because all of a sudden we're in Trials of the Jedi and then it's just over. I mean, it's like, wait, what? This battle just started. You're starting to reintroduce characters from other stories, but then the battle just ends in the final book, and I have no idea like why it ended so quickly. Like I don't know. Like there were a lot of things that I feel like they obviously were trying to build up from like all the other stories, but it just, at least to me, fell flat and again punished because I didn't read the other stuff.
It's interesting that in phase 2 I thought that the Battle of Dalna worked really well, that we got to see it from multiple perspectives, and then they did the same thing for Eriadu, and it didn't work for me because I don't think they set up why Eriadu was important until Trials of the Jedi. Then I was reading that and I was like, okay, they did a little legwork to explain why everyone was converging there. But we've been reading about the battle for months in the comics, and I've seen it end twice from 2 different perspectives, and it just fell out of order more than anything.
Yeah. But let's go to the endings, because I think that you can forgive stories maybe, you know, having hiccups or being bumpy along the road as long as, you know, the landing is stuck and you know, bows are tied and things are wonderful at the end. And I think that a lot of us were obviously expecting to get to the end of Trials of the Jedi and feel fulfillment and being like, okay, the end is here for the High Republic and we feel good about it. So I'm curious to know everyone's, you know, final thoughts on like how High Republic ended with Trials of the Jedi, because it's been, you know, it's been a long journey. We've, you know, read adult novels, we've read young adult novels, we've read comic books, audiobooks. Like we've gone through the gamut through years talking about it, and like this was the book that was supposed to tie everything together. So my question is like, did it stick the landing for you? And like, how do you feel in this post High Republic haze now, Laura?
It absolutely did not stick for me, and I feel annoyed and mad. But if I could tie it back to the Battle of Eriadu for 1 second,
sure.
The way it plays out in Trials of the Jedi, I have no problem with the ending. I like that. The only reason it worked for me was because we tied it back in with Vise in Porter Engle. I like the ending of that story. That's kind of my one thing with the Trials that I don't mind, is how their story went out. I thought that it was a really cool way
Interesting. For me, it was anticlimactic. It's just like, oh, I've been toying with you. Bye.
That's so funny. Okay, so I thought
I loved it too.
That worked for me, but everything else with the Battle of Iriadu, I do not care. I don't care. I don't understand why we had to bring back Joss and Pika Adren. Everybody had completely forgotten about them. I read the Star Wars Insider stuff for Phase 3, so I was following along with their story a little bit, and I still was like, I don't care, and I don't understand why we're bringing these two characters back in when I've got a laundry list of other characters whose story I would prefer to see that isn't them. I also don't really understand why we had to bring the Battle of Iriadu, or why we had to bring the planet Iriadu into it at all. Was it just because it tied back to Tarkin? Is that why we chose it? Because if we were trying to like tie in this sort of like warrior culture, I would have preferred that they bring in the Mandalorians. I just didn't understand why it had to be Iriadu. I just did not care, honestly, at all.
I guess it was because of where the occlusion zone was. It happened to be kind of in that corner of the galaxy. So
got it.
But I agree. The whole time I was like, why do we care about Iriadu this much?
Yeah, I truly didn't. But I think the stuff with Vise and Porter just somehow it just worked. I mean, the fact that we had this resolution of like him kind of realizing like the reason I've sort of let you stay alive is because I still have this connection and attachment to my sister, and you're like the one person that's still alive that like knew her, and you're kind of, because of that, you're also in some way sort of keeping her alive, and that can't continue. And I thought that realization was actually like really beautifully written, really beautifully the way it played out. That worked, I think, really well for me. And I say that as somebody who didn't read the Blade comic because I just did not connect that much with Porter, to be honest. But I thought that worked. My only connection to him is what we get in the books, and I thought all of that tied up really well. That's kind of where things end with me with Trials of the Jedi. The fact that we kind of left Xylan Graf and Kara Santeca, their story sort of fell away. Sylvester Yarrow and Jordana Sparkburn, their story just kind of fell away. So there are a lot of characters that I thought should have been cast in this book that weren't, and characters that had no business being in here. Yeah. And I think that sort of big picture of things is what took me out of it, unfortunately, too much for me to be able to enjoy it. Also, by the time we were like 75% through the book, I was just like, when are we, like, there's too many things to tie up. You've got 20, now you haven't used the whole book to tie this up. You have 25% of a book that's already too short to tie this up. So there, among other reasons, those are a lot of the reasons it didn't work for me. We can get into the Avar and Elzar of it later if you want.
We will. Alex, so what are your final thoughts on how Trials concluded?
I had the same thought about Joss and Pika, where I was just like, we keep on introducing new characters, and now we're going to go back to these two who haven't been around since like the beginning of Phase 1. And even though Joss and that bartender, like, they had one of my favorite scenes of the book, like such a badass, like dead men don't pay their tabs or something. I was like, awesome. There was stuff in it that I liked, but I was like, but there are all these other characters and all these other things that I feel we could have spent that time providing more closure for. I remember being surprised at like the makeup of the Luminous 9. I liked most of the choices, but I had just leaving Vernestra off felt so strange that she was like one of the main characters. And that might have been because she was put into the Acolyte and they were like, we want to have a little more tension. We know she lives, and they did rationalize it pretty well of like, she can feed the path to someone else and she can be a backup. But it just felt strange to not have her as like the final Avengers team up. Markion, I understand, I think, why he has that turn where he just kind of like reveals all along that he just wants to be the one to make the choice to kill the galaxy. I'm like, that is, at the end of the day, the ultimate expression of nihilism. But it just felt so out of nowhere. Like, he seemed like he was this master plotter the whole time, and then at the very end, he's like just twirling his mustache. And
it was very, very Justice League Dark Side, just saying generic dialogue. It's like humanity will be dead, and it's like, oh, okay. I thought we were a complex villain, and now we're just saying,
it just made him seem
stuff. Yeah.
less complex. But I did like his ending. I like putting him in prison to die alone and forgotten.
Yep.
So it was a mixed bag for me. At the end of the day, I closed the book and it didn't like sour me on the High Republic at all. And I felt satisfied enough and intrigued by like the little plot threads that they sprinkled out for Phase More. It just didn't leave me feeling like, hell yeah, the way Light of the Jedi, or I don't know if that's appropriate for the Rising Storm. I didn't feel like hell yeah, but I felt like that rush of, whoa, what a ride.
No, I totally agree with everybody. I feel like I think it's a standalone book. I'm just like, oh yeah, this is great. Like I think this is a good Star Wars book. And if I had only read Light of the Jedi and Trials of the Jedi, I'd be like, this is a cool duology. I have no idea what happened in between, but some cool stuff definitely happened here. But reading it as this, culmination, right? I mean, kind of like Episode 9. It's supposed to be the culmination of all these films, and then you're at the end of it, you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll watch something else now. And that's kind of like how I felt with Trials of the Jedi. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll read the next Star Wars book now, because I don't really like this. Does not feel like a culmination. It just felt like we finished, but we didn't culminate. I don't know I don't know how else to explain it, because I wasn't really satisfied in any way. I think, like you said, Alex, Markion's end, I think, was satisfying, because the Republic is fair and like doesn't kill him, but then his fate is actually worse than death. So it's kind of like cool to just see him floating in space and not even being visited by the ghosts, the specters of his past. I thought that was interesting, but I liked the potential payoffs of future stories more that the book set up, more so than the actual endings that it provided, especially for Elzar and Avar, which we'll get to. But because everything else was just like, okay, we knew they were gonna win, but the way that they won is just like, oh, well, okay, cool, I guess. So, like,
it's interesting, like thinking back. If I go character by character, I feel like I'm going like, yeah, I like how their story ended. I like that. But I just something about it didn't feel like a culmination, like you said. It kind of reminds me of the end of Battlestar Galactica, which is a show that I adore, and I think I like the finale more than most, and I like Trials of the Jedi more than most, but still, like, it doesn't feel. They did some things where I was like, that kind of came out of left field, but oh well. The ride was fun. Like overall, the ride of the High Republic I enjoyed. So,
but let's talk a little bit about Elzar and Avar, because I think Star Wars has had a notorious history of not allowing its romances to flourish, and I think that one of the things that everyone was looking forward to in High Republic as a whole is just Jedi that that actually do have attachments and fall in love and all these things. And Temptation of the Force, I know it was a big deal when it came out, because it finally allowed these two characters to come together. So I can only imagine the frustration after Episode 9 and seeing Rey and Ben not get together, to all of a sudden get right back and do it again, albeit in a different way. So, like, Laura, what was your relationship when you saw how the Blight were obliterated by having these two characters just be forever torn apart?
Devastated. Like, literally, I mean, devastated. So I read this book, and I finished it before it came out, and I just remember thinking, like, oh god, like most of the High Republic fandom that I kind of associate with and that I follow are like other Avar Elzar shippers. Like that's kind of like where the subset of the High Republic I've kind of fallen into. And I just remember thinking like, oh man, this is gonna be like Fallen Star level pissed. I swear to God, like there's no way that this is gonna go over well. And I don't think I've seen that strong of a reaction to it. I think like Stella and Geos got a stronger reaction out of most of that sort of part of the fandom than Avar also. And I can kind of see why people are torn. And my issue is that we got to know these characters as human beings, as flawed human beings who have each had their own separate struggle with the dark, who then have this ending that feels very mythical. Mm-hmm. And I get why on the surface that works for some people. I understand. I can totally understand it. But as somebody who got to know them as humans, particularly in Temptation of the Force, where they have this very human story, to give them this ending that sounds like something that it's like if you're telling a story about a constellation and you're like, oh, it's these two people and this is what happened and this is what they did. Like, cool. It's a cool story. That works. But I don't know the people behind the stories of the constellations as humans. They're just stories to me. These two people I've gotten to know as human beings over the course of 4 years. I needed them to have a more human ending. Yeah. And this wasn't that at all. I'm like, but like, what are they going to eat? Is there fresh water there? Like all of these things, I'm just like, I don't understand. And the fact that they now have, they have to now like spend eternity being able to like see each other, but never be able to like talk to each other or like touch each other. That sounds like torture to me. I'm like, you just doomed these two characters to an eternity of what sounds like torture. So I walked away from this book very unhappy based almost solely on that. That said, the way their story is written and the way it plays out is beautiful. Yeah. Like the prose itself is gorgeous. Like when I talked about this on my show with Alice, she referred to it as like stream of consciousness because it does sort of run on, I think, purposely. And I thought it was I agree with that, but I think it's so beautifully done. And I was crying when I read it because I'm like, this actually is really beautiful, but I actually like big picture hate it. So there's a lot of mixed emotion there, but that was my main issue, is that I just needed something a little bit more hopeful from their ending that I didn't get. And part of it is also that like I had this conversation with my buddy Brad at Star Wars Celebration in London, where he was like, we know that the Jedi have this thing with romantic relationships where they're like, where they just pretty much don't allow it. And they're pretty strict about it in like the sort of more modern era of Jedi that we know. And he's like, there has to be a reason for that, right? And so we're seeing the story with Elzar and Avar. Like we must the conclusion must be something that's like the warning of like why we don't allow this kind of attachment. There must be something that happens. And there kind of wasn't. So I'm like, okay, so like it seemed like they were sort of best case scenario. Like if you're gonna have like you're gonna ban romantic relationships, but like it's not because of them. So there must be another story somewhere.
Yoda seemed totally chill with it.
Totally fine. Like surprisingly so.
He's like, be careful, you crazy kids.
Yeah, right. But have fun. And yeah, it just, I don't know. I just was fully, for the most part, let down by their ending in the big picture of things. I still I love their journey. I love the way that we got here, but a lot of it's just sort of felt like Charles Soule kicked them off in Light of the Jedi and sort of laid the groundwork for their story. And then they had all of this story that happened in between. And it sort of felt like a lot of that was like for nothing by the time we get to Charles Soule going to wrap them up. Like a bunch of other people took them and built them up into something else, but he kind of put them back in their place where they were before they sort of grew and evolved into what they were today. So I was just not happy with that. And I can see the argument of why like this is kind of the best case scenario, the best for ending for them. Like they didn't die. So I guess there's that.
But, there are fates worse than death, though.
Which is what this sounds like to me. So yeah, I overall was not happy with the way the story ended, and it did make me wish that they either weren't in this book and we had just left them in Temptation of the Force and been done with it.
I think what you said about like knowing about a myth, but not the people, like we hear stories about Hercules or whoever, but you don't spend that much time getting to know him as a human, or like we know all these Greek myths, but like that's so interesting because Star Wars is myth, but it is also very personal. And I think that's such an interesting way to look at it, that like this is, I think they probably sat down and mapped out this story of two Jedi who, like, I think they treated it like the mythical version of the story, the big broad strokes of everything, and these two Jedi will stay behind and sacrifice for the good of the rest of the galaxy. And then they started at the beginning and wrote all these stories, and we got to know these mythical characters on this deep level. And it's like, oh no, like it makes the whole story different. That's really interesting. I love the way you said that.
But it's an interesting thing because it's part of Western storytelling, specifically like American storytelling. I think where the hero can never live the goodness that he brought up or they brought upon the society that they helped, and it's one of those things where they always have to be punished, like Frodo or the rings, right? Like like after it, like he destroyed the ring, but he has to go to the Undying Lands because the wounds have never healed. And
I mean, that goes way back to like the Bible too. Moses leads the Israelites to the Promised Land, but he can't go there.
He can't go in. Exactly. It's one of those things where I'm just like, just break the wheel, man. Like have the hero. I mean, sometimes the hero can be like, hey, man, this is I can enjoy what I fought for too. And I think in Eastern myths, like I mean, someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong or here if I'm wrong, but I think it's very much more of a Western mythology thing where the hero always has to be almost punished in a way that it feels frustrating. I mean, I think sometimes it definitely works and it's definitely okay in many stories, and we've seen it played out in ways that I think are very interesting and compelling. But sometimes it's frustrating, right? Because sometimes you just want the good guys to win and win. I mean, I'm not a shipper, but I was like, hey, let those crazy kids be together. Like let them go right off into the sunset. Maybe they could have been the two lost Jedi, and they have their busts in the library because they just decided to run off and have a little happy family. I would have been okay with that.
It's interesting. I think that I just read it, maybe that final chapter or little bit about them. I guess I read it as they don't seem like, it's not ideal, but they don't seem tortured by it. I didn't get that sense.
Not in the first decade, maybe.
And yeah, that's day one.
Day one,
they're like, so this is fine.
Ask them after a month and see how it's going.
Right. But
and the name was just having a good time. It's like, hey, thanks.
Maybe I'm just like putting in extra thought and headcanon that, I bet Sophros, they're subsisting off of the Force. The Force is providing for them. And maybe it will let them live like long, beautiful lives. Maybe time passes differently for them, and then they're going to just hang out. They're going to hang out on Planet X for the rest of their lives together and happy. Like once the planet's back in balance, they'll reunite. I'm just taking extra leaps and being
and that's fair.
I hope so.
Trust me. I've gone down those leaps and I have had I'm like, how can I rationalize this? Maybe they'll keep going and we'll get another story. But the fact that like they take the ship off the planet to like leave at all the like survivors or whatever, and then Aslan, of all characters, takes the other ship on the planet and just I'm like, cool. So they really have like no way to get off this planet ever. So that was frustrating. I also I hate Aslan Rel as a character. I'm sorry. Like I missed a lot of awesome. I only got him in the books. I didn't see any other version of him, and I just did not care. And so the fact that he's the one that number one lives, number two gets off the planet to just ride off into the sunset, and they had to stay. I was like, no, I was so mad. But yeah, that unfortunately was one of the aspects that just didn't work for me. And I can totally see how people are like, no, the fact that they got this mythical ending is kind of cool. It works. Fine. That's great. Yeah. Just as somebody who really latched on to them, it just didn't work.
I don't know. And there was part of me that was hoping that Planet X was kind of like Talinor, and then it ties into Jedi Survivor. And it's like this thing where it's just like this mythical planet where these things are happening and people can be freed, but then it's just kind of not. I don't know. It was a whole. And I didn't read the younger reader books. I didn't read any of the Planet X stuff. So I'm just like, what the hell is this Planet X? I know I saw some books that are titled that, but it was just very confusing. So the mechanics of why they must become these mythical beings that hold the planet in balance, I was just like, I don't understand, and maybe I just don't have the mental capacity to understand why these things work this way. But I was just like, it's almost bigger than Skywalker Saga and Mortis. I'm just like Star Wars needs, sometimes it just gets too big for its own good, because I'm just like, if this is this big, then why should I care about the mainline stories that are a little more contained? But I don't know. That's my little ape brain that can't understand big concepts, I
Well,
guess.
I do think that something that would have helped is explaining a little better how it all worked. And I do
Yeah.
think, like, I don't quite get why Avar has to go into like the heart of darkness to be a pinprick of light, and why they have to make the yin and yang
Yeah.
darkness with a pinprick of light and vice versa. And I don't quite understand how the vergence and this hunger works, and like how I've read it several times and I think I understand it enough, but it did take several, like, let me go
Mm.
back and try this again. And I think it
Maybe it's gonna
just,
tie into Ahsoka season 2.
yeah,
Filoni's just gonna like bring it in.
it just needed a little more clarification. And then, yeah, you have all the questions of how do they eat? Like, do they
Yeah.
get breaks at all?
Yeah,
What
right.
are they doing? And Elzar being like the pinprick of darkness, I'm like, well, what does that look like? I have my own version of it, but is he up there using the dark side and not being a
Yeah.
Jedi anymore? Or like, I don't fully
I didn't buy
grasp it.
him being the. I mean, yeah, he
Like
was
you
like
just
he-
you just wanted to make a yin yang. You just wanted to do that. That's all. Like
Yeah.
that was all you wanted to do, and you didn't care about the mechanics behind it. And I wish that they had put a little bit more thought and care into it. Allison made the same point, Alex, on our show, where she was like, "I wish they would have explained it just a little more. Like I needed some more. I needed a few more
Mhm.
pages of this.
why
Of like
why is it so important that you stay there? How are you going to counteract the deaths of hundreds of nameless, however many they lost? Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
what are you two doing
Maybe they'll
to
have a
fix it? I
story
don't
on
know.
Star Wars Insider where
Yeah.
they explain it,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
it'll be an
Five of
exclusive that I won't read either. But
5 of us will read it, and we'll know, and nobody else will know.
exactly.
My other weird thing is that like Avar Chris kind of goes down in history as like this like peak Jedi, you know, like
Mhm.
she's brought up in stories set in the future with some regularity, and there's no mention of Elzar again ever again. I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, but he also stayed. Like, why did he get left out? Like, I don't understand. I'm like, yeah, she had this like great ability to sort of like connect all the Jedi. That's great, but like, it just seems strange to me that I'm like, why did she get to go down in history as all that after all he overcame? Like, I know that there are people who don't like Elzar Man, and that's fine, but it just it seems like it should have built up to something different. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I could see the Jedi who like were always annoyed by him being like, we're gonna hold up Avar and kind of
Let's just remove
not talk
him.
about
Yeah.
the unconventional
Maybe
Jedi,
maybe it was
especially as they.
Vernestra. Vernestra's just like, well, you
Yeah, it's true.
killed this. It's like,
Vernestra
I'm
never
gonna
liked him.
smear you. Which could work. Oh yeah, please.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the Jedi are. I guess that's a good point. Is that they probably don't want to. They're not a group that would want to encourage nonconformity.
Mhm.
So I guess I can kind of see where you're coming from there.
Especially like a post Guardian Protocol Jedi
Yeah.
Order, I guess. One of the interesting things that Trials of the Jedi does is not just wrap up, well, attempt to wrap up all the loose ends. It also kind of has all these blurbs about these groupings of characters and where their story ends open-endedly, which obviously leads to the opportunity of continuing stories, especially after we saw Michael Siglain, I think it was, that said the possibility of Phase more. So any of those stories, or maybe Avar and Elzar, any other threads of how Phase 3 has ended that any of you would like to see continue? And what does Phase more look to you guys? Does it look like actual faces, or does it look like what the Crystal Crown and Wayseeker are doing right now?
I
Nora,
haven't
start
read
with you.
either. I haven't read either, so I couldn't say for sure. I there are definitely some characters whose stories I don't think wrapped up really at all. That I would like to see more of. I would like to see what happens with Avon Staros and where her story picks up, hopefully in the near future, because we see her sort of fly off after the one YA book and then nothing ever again. I read something on, I think it was like the High Republic subreddit, where a group of people were talking about how Sylvester Yarrow was very similar of a character to the vessel crew. What's the pilot's name?
Yeah, I know exactly.
Or Affy?
Affy
Yeah,
Hollow.
I
So
totally
Affy
agree.
Hollow and Sylvester Yarrow, very similar characters, and they're like, yeah, so I guess the like justification of like leaving Sylvester and Jordana out of it is kind of like, you have these other characters, let's focus on tying up their story. At the same time, I thought Jordana Sparkbird was really interesting of a character, and I would like to circle back with her and Sylvester and see where they're at, what adventures they're having. Xylan Graff and Kara Santeca I brought up earlier. We know that the Santeca family name sort of continues on, but like the Graff family name seems to kind of die out. We don't hear of them in future stories that I know of. Maybe we do, and I just haven't read those.
They're in quite a few comics.
Oh, really? Okay, got it. Well, good to know. But I'd like to see more there. Vernestra has never actually been like a character I care much about, so the fact that she's kind of our through line to the future, I'm kind of like, great. Of all the characters, awesome. That's great. But yeah, there's definitely it's again, my love of all of this tends to be so based in characters, and so it's really just like which characters are stories that like I'm not satisfied with or didn't really get an ending at all. Those are the ones I'd like to pick up with.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about Affy and Sylvester, but yeah, it is like a very similar thing. And just talking about character management, I don't think we needed like Baron Bulin. We basically wound up with 3 like mad Nile scientists, and I was like, we probably could have just stuck with Dr. Uttersond, and he could have been the main villain that was the mad scientist that was dealt with. But yeah, that's interesting about Silvestri.
It's one of those things that made reading the YA books complicated sometimes, because exactly, like, I would be like, wait, is this one, or is this the other one, or because they're, I mean, and as much as I like them, because I think the YA books on the whole for all 3 phases have consistently been pretty strong, at least for me. But like the plethora of characters is just all very hard to keep track of, especially like these ones that are very similar. But in terms of like moving forward, I mean, I think the Wreath is definitely a contender for a story that I think is going to be really interesting, because as much as I feel like his story kind of spun wheels a little bit towards the end, because he's just like doing the kind of same thing with Aslan for 2 books, kind of seeing them now unshackled from the nameless mystery and just continue on and discover or go through the journey of the dark side with Aslan. I think it's going to be really interesting and kind of more standalone stories. I think Kalnaka and Buriaga like have a lot of opportunities for storytelling, especially Kalnaka, since we can do kind of the same thing as Wayseeker's doing and see where his story goes towards into the Acolyte, but also Wookiees live hundreds of years, so also into the past. Like, where was Kalnaka during Phase 2? I think it would be interesting to see other like Battle of Jeddah type of stuff, or the years like maybe he was there, and we just get another POV story from his angle. But lots of opportunities. I don't know if there's gonna be like a phase on the whole, right?
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna call it like here's wave 1 of phase more. I think it's gonna be. I don't really consider Wayseeker Crystal Crown to be part of that. I see them as more connected to the Acolyte, but obviously Wayseeker has like it wraps up a storyline that was kind of dropped from the Rising Storm, and I think that they have a chance to do that. But yeah, I think it'll be more one-off stories, or maybe like who knows, a trilogy about Wreath hunting for Aslan and whatever Aslan's up to, or we could do more about how the path of the Closed Fist turned into the Nile, because they left that kind of open-ended in that short story. So I definitely think there are more little plot lines that they could revisit here or there, instead of just like, and now we're going to do another phase that
phase
keeps the story
-1
going. Yeah.
Here we go.
Phase 0.
Get ready for another Ancestor of the Rose. But yeah, like, we could be talking about High Republic forever, because there are so many things that have been released that we haven't touched on, and hopefully there will be things to talk about in the future with Phase More. But before we wrap up everything, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Alex, for joining me to have this for me, honestly, therapy session, because I've been wanting to talk about High Republic with people for a while, because my co-hosts do not read the High Republic books, and my partner obviously does not care about Star Wars at all. So it's good to talk about someone with it, about it with someone. So thank you very much. But any closing thoughts about High Republic before we sign off?
I'm tempted to do a reread at some point. Just because I would like to kind of go back and see like what connective tissue did I miss
Mhm.
along the way? Because I'm sure it's there, particularly with like phase two. Or maybe it's not. I don't know. But I'm just curious to go back and do a reread. But overall, like I am trying to like get past the ending that was so unsatisfying to me and just remember what the High Republic was and what it's meant to me and how it has been this thing that has kind of kept me
Mhm.
tied to Star Wars as a whole, because a lot of like these more recent TV things that have come out are not things that I've really connected with, and
Mhm.
so I felt very disconnected from the fandom and from my love of this thing. And the High Republic has really kept me tied to it. So I'm grateful for it in that way, and overall really happy with the journey that we went on. And just trying to remember that it is indeed about the journey and not the destination
It's
in
true.
this respect.
Alex,
Yeah.
any closing thoughts on High Republic?
I agree. Like, this has kept me so engaged and excited for 4.5 years. And endings are hard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like,
Don't be sad
I
that it's over. Be happy that it happened.
Yeah.
right.
No, but
And
for real.
yeah, it wasn't a perfect ending, but I just enjoyed the ride the whole time. It's provided so many awesome moments, great characters that I
Mhm.
love. I mean, like, some new top tier Jedi and villains
Mhm.
that I feel like more people should experience. And I agree with Laura. Like, I think a reread would be a lot of fun if I could ever find the time
Yeah,
to
indeed.
like that, hit pause for like a couple months on new Star Wars books, and maybe I could squeeze it in there.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm always thankful for Star Wars to take a swing, even if it. I mean, I think this for the most part hit, but I'll still take a swing that doesn't hit because it means that it's trying something new and
Mhm.
trying to push the boundaries of what Star Wars can be. So I think that definitely thankful for the High Republic, for the Luminous authors, for being so passionate in creating this world that so many people connected with, and despite the bumps in the road, definitely like an awesome journey to have gone through. I mean, you know, I love all my High Republic books, and definitely looking forward to continuing the stories in one way or the other. Because it's always nice to take a break from the Skywalkers and see what all the other crazy kids are up to and how they're destroying the galaxy. So it's always nice. It's always nice to see them. So I'm looking forward to more gilded High Republic adventures in the future. But with that, like I said before, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Alex, for joining me. Laura, before we go, what where can we find you? Tell us a little bit about Force Toast and what's happening there, and where everyone can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky at Laura. That's kind of the one place where I remain even remotely active, which is even still not much. Not doing a lot of socials these days and kind of enjoying this elongated break from it. But the podcast that I host with my friend Alice is called Force Toast, a Star Wars happy hour. You can find that on Blue Sky at Force Toast Pod. Our website is also forcetoastpod.com. You can find all the links of places you can listen to us, where essentially she and I just drink wine and talk about Star Wars. We're both big readers, so we tend to read not a lot of the comics, but a lot of the like young adult and adult novels. We tend to stick mostly with those and do a lot of recaps and just kind of talk about what's generally in the news in the world of Star Wars.
Alex, tell us a little bit about you and Molly and Star Wars Explained, what you guys got going on, and where people can find you.
Yeah, we have our YouTube channel, Star Wars Explained, and we do a weekly kind of like look back at the last week of Star Wars, whether it's news or whatever comics or new canon has come out. I'm also working on like I do a yearly complete canon timeline that includes the High Republic, but I'm doing that video, but just for the High Republic Publishing Initiative,
Oh,
so we can
cool.
have like one solid reminder of everything that happened in order from phase 2 to 1 to 3. And I'm also working on like I've seen the same questions pop up about the High Republic over and over, so I'm working on like a frequently asked questions video. So hopefully I never get asked like, what order do I read the books in ever again?
Where do you start? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big
it's,
one.
it's like wherever you want. Well, thank you guys. This has been great as expected. So hopefully everyone listening or watching has enjoyed this, and we're able to sympathize, empathize, or be vitriolically against everything we said. But if you have anything to say, please say it in the comments and boost the algorithm so more people can get to watch this. But with that, thank you both of you, and thank you to everyone watching. As always, we have been Triad of the Force. If you like what you have seen or listened to, make sure to follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram. I don't even know where we are anymore, but we're mostly on Blue Sky. Follow us here on YouTube. Subscribe, leave a comment, ring that bell, I guess, for notifications if this even works. But if you like what you saw, stay tuned because we'll have more episodes with Chase and Nani in the future, and maybe hopefully continue the Triad format. But with that, thank you so much, and may the Force be with you.